Well, hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com and The Resistance Radio. This is going to be a dual show that you're going to see on both of the podcasts. So if you haven't got a chance, go to thechrisvossshow.com or theresistanceradio.com. You can subscribe to both podcasts. Some have more political than other ones, but this is going to be an interesting discussion we're going to be having today, and you'll want to subscribe to all of it. You go to youtube.com/Chris Voss to see the video version of this thing as it comes to audio through our podcast. But we appreciate you guys subscribing. Go to thecvpn.com or chrisvosspodcastnetwork.com. You can subscribe to all 9 podcasts that we have out there. And oh my gosh, you will be so smart. You just won't talk to people anymore, I suppose. There you go. You'll be like Einstein. Anyway, guys, we certainly appreciate you guys tuning in. And today I have a most wonderful guest. We always have the best guests, of course, here on the Chris Voss Show. Darlene McDonald. She's the DNC National Committee woman-elect for Utah, and we're going to talk to her about some of the other issues that are going on in the world today, George Floyd protests, et cetera, et cetera. But welcome to the show, Darlene. How you doing?
Thank you for having me. I am doing okay.
Well, I think we all are with the COVID-19 and the unrest and the crazy old grandpa in the White House stuff. So,
Yeah.
I mean, as long as we can walk ramps better than he can, I think we're doing fairly good. I don't know.
I tell you, yeah, I hesitate on that one.
There you go. So, Darlene, give us your www website so people can check you out online, and give us a rundown about a short bio on you, if you will.
Okay, my www.darlenemcdonald.com. I got very lucky to be able to get my name, Darlene McDonald, which I actually got that name. I secured my domain name at 2:00 in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah. It occurred to me. I tried to get my maiden name a long time ago, and I could not. It was taken. And
your husband probably bought that. Years. No, I'm just kidding.
I know.
your pending husband. I don't know.
I know. It occurred to me that I wasn't Darlene Johnson
did you get married
anymore.
because you couldn't get your maiden? Is that what you're telling us right now? Did your husband?
I got married so I could get my domain name.
That reminds me of when I was in school. When I used to see the girls, they would always, any boy that they liked, they would be trying to see how their name would look at them and just be like, "What are you doing?" But I know, whatever.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Or if you have a last name that you really don't want to have, like I've seen some people it's like you should get married just to get rid of that last name. But so Darlene, you do a lot of things. I read the bio on your website. You're into whiskey. We talked about in the pre-show. You're political. You work with a lot of different groups here in Utah. We've been profiling. I've been up here in Utah writing a book from Las Vegas, and my family's up here and making sure they don't get the COVID. And so I've been kind of interviewing a lot of different people. We interviewed Chris Peterson, Karina, who's the lieutenant governor candidate. We interviewed the AG. We've interviewed about 5 or 6 reps. We have a bunch more people on. In fact, the young lady that we referenced earlier in the pre-show, who's on the front page of the Tribune, I just sent her a second invite because she never answered the original one. So hopefully we'll have her on the show. So we're going to have these great Democrats from Utah on the show, and we'll probably have more around the country as we go to the election. But tell us about your job, what you're doing, and what effect it should have on Utah and, of course, the world.
Well, I moved to Utah 18 years ago this month, actually.
Mm-hmm. Was that voluntary? Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
It was.
People go, "Did you move to Utah, Chris?" I'm like, "Not voluntary. It was like parole or something." And there was an officer there.
I did. I love the mountains. I did not feel like I had a connection to the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
I have a connection to the mountains.
Yeah.
And that's why I packed up my kids and we moved out here 18 years ago this month. And Utah is my home. Mm-hmm. Met my husband here, raised my kids here, found a job here, and got into activism here in Utah. Yes, it is. I'm a Democrat, lifelong Democrat. Doesn't mean I haven't voted Republican or independent before in my life. I have, but I am a lifelong Democrat. And one thing I have to say that I was not prepared for when I moved to Utah, and I grossly underestimated, was the impact of my political voice and how that is minimized per se in Utah versus Ohio. Ohio is a battleground state, a swing state. The citizens and residents of Utah take their vote very seriously. Yes.
And so what do you mean by that with Utah? Does Utah not seem to care as much in voting and being political?
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. That's exactly what I mean. I was not prepared for that. I found quite disheartening that many Democrats of this state self-disenfranchise. And they do that because they are taught that because this is a perceived red state, that their vote does not count. And I am on a quest to challenge that and to challenge every Democrat, left-leaning, independent, left-leaning, unaffiliated, or even someone who is straight in the middle. I'm going to challenge that notion that your vote does not count because you're in Utah. So that's my quest. That's going to be my lifelong mission as long as I stay in this state.
When we spoke in the pre-show, my goal is to turn Utah blue. Yeah. I think this is a definitely a watershed moment, a watershed year. The president is the referendum, really, when it comes down to it, I suppose. And there's a lot of call out for, and I've been telling Utahns this in our interviews we've been doing, that it's going to get really dark and ugly. There's going to be a lot of bankruptcies. We're still in the honeymoon phase of the COVID-19 financial crisis. People are still living off their savings. There are a lot of people in dire need. And we're seeing the food bank lines, but it's going to get worse. And people are going to run out of savings. They're going to run out of stuff. I'm already seeing the homes for sale popping up everywhere. I lived through this in Vegas during the 2008 crisis. I know exactly how this baby goes. And so more and more, it's really important that Utahns or anyone voting around the nation gets involved, gets aware with what's going on, because these are leaders that are going to have to guide us through a very dark crisis in time.
Yes, I agree 100%. I believe the last I read that we are approaching unemployment numbers that resembles the Great Depression of 1929.
In some cases, larger in Las Vegas.
Exactly. And for the people that followed the Great Recession of 2007, and I know you said you had Chris Peterson on, so he would have been an expert on that, right? Because he worked with the CFPB. So if you followed the Great Depression, the Great Recession, you saw that many people lost their jobs, and we had to get someone into office who could understand what needed to be done. You needed to understand and know economics, especially Keynesian economics, and monetary policy and also fiscal policy, and the combination of both to get us out of that recession. And luckily, America elected Barack Obama to be president of the United States in 2008, and we went to work. Now, the reason why that is important and where we are facing right now is because we're going to need a lot of not just fiscal policy, but we're going to need a lot of monetary policy as well in order to get us out of what is going to become another Great Depression if we don't do this right. And we could have had a Great Depression had Barack Obama and his Treasury Department at that time, and even Ben Bernanke and Henry Paulson, who were Republicans, doing the right thing and injecting the economy with money in order to get people back to work, get businesses back on their feet. And people that were out of work, they had to have food stamps, so that earned Barack Obama the food stamp president at the time.
I mean, people just don't realize how, I was trained as a stockbroker, so I understand the market. I understand Federal Reserve. I can talk M1, M2 policy all day long if people want to understand what's going on with the Fed, and most people don't.
And they don't. They really don't. Exactly.
We came to the brink. I mean, the brink, the standstill brink. I mean, right now, I don't know. It's worse with the higher thing, but we had big organizations that would fail, and if they failed, it would have been a total collapse.
It would have, and that's when I really started paying attention differently to politics, because I was taking an economics class. That was the great time to actually be taking an economics class. It was awesome. I mean, it wasn't awesome what was happening in the economy, but I was taking an economics class at Westminster College at the time, and running into the classroom to learn how to apply what we were learning in the classroom in real world examples, because it was happening in that moment. So I learned a lot. And I remember becoming very, very, very upset. And I think I could say his name now because he's no longer in office, with former Senator Orrin Hatch.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I was so angry.
Yeah.
Because they were not telling people the truth. And this was another reason why I got into politics. We have to have elected officials who tell the truth.
Definitely.
The sky was falling. The sky was falling.
Yeah.
And they were not telling people that the sky was falling. Why we had to pass the TARP at the time, and why we had to pass those economic relief packages, and why the sky was falling. And if we didn't pass that, there wasn't a tomorrow. The economy was going to collapse.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was important.
He was a senator for way too long.
Yeah.
Yeah. We lived around the corner in California from his sister, and we used to play with his sister's kids in the pool. They were our age. And so we spent a lot of time over at her house. And every now and then he would show up for dinners and political things that he would do. And I was 11, and I remember looking at him, and they're like, "This is Senator Orrin Hatch." And I was like, "Okay, so that's what a senator looks like." And I just, I'm 11. Like, what do I care? But like 40 years later, some bloody thing, he was still in office, and I'm just like, this is wrong. But anyway.
Yeah.
So we've seen a lot of different things happen, and now we're in the midst of it again. And I think this is why Biden's doing well for a lot of fronts, is because we know that, and anybody with a brain, let's put it that way, knows that he worked with Obama to get us through that crisis.
Yeah.
It's just astounding to me when I see people go, the Obama didn't do anything for the economy, or I think the big Republicans' argument was the growth is too slow.
They did it. They intentionally slowed it.
We came from zero, man. Like, what do you want? Like, you can't just flip the economy on, and we're seeing it again now with Donald Trump. He just thinks, you just reopen everything. Oh yeah, go back to fine next week. So there's a lot of stuff going on with Utah. I know I think I know one of the big problems Utah has is and you identified one of them as political activism, but also money. It seems like a lot of Democrats really struggle to fundraise. Is that true, or is that my misinterpretation?
Democrats do struggle to fundraise because we're in Utah, and there's the perception that Utah is deep red. Mm-hmm. I'm going to challenge that a little bit. This is one thing that I said when I was running for office. I said it to Chris Peterson. Democratic values are Utah values.
Yeah.
What we fight for in the Democratic Party is what Utah say is their value system, and respecting people, believing in the family first, family values. That is what we hear all the time with Utah, family values. We are fighting for the family. When your family is out of work, when someone in your family is out of work, you're going to need some assistance. Yes, everybody wants a job. People don't want a handout. I don't know why that became synonymous with the Democratic Party and black people.
I think it was. I don't know if it was for black people. I know with poor people, it came from Johnson, didn't it? And Johnson was a Democrat when he enacted the Medicare and a lot of the what they call the safety net for.
That was FDR.
Was it FDR? Okay.
Yeah. The New Deal. The New Deal.
Didn't Johnson do? I gotta go check my history.
Well,
I think
Johnson. He implemented, and I'm actually studying Lyndon Johnson right now. He did do a lot of around Social Security and the work program, and I know that he ran FDR's work program out of the New Deal before he became, congressman, and then later on Vice President Johnson, and later President Johnson.
Mm-hmm. And in Utah, and we have some interesting things going on in Utah. I've talked about this a lot on the podcast. Utah has one extra kid per family on average than the rest of the nation. And you would think that healthcare, education, like all these things would be like important. Right now, Utah, we talked about this with the Attorney General candidate for the Democratic Party, Greg, I forget his last name, horrible names, can you tell? But he's on the podcast, so you can find him there. But he talked about how, we're part of this lawsuit that the Republicans are doing, the AG Republicans are doing. I think it's centered out of Texas, where they're trying to overthrow Obamacare in the middle of a pandemic. When people lose their jobs, they can't pay their COBRAs and everything else. I was trying to find this on the website, and it does. What percentage of the state is registered to vote compared to the population? I know.
I don't. I don't. We have about. I know there's about 700,000 registered Republicans. There are about 400,000 registered Democrats. If you add the number of registered Democrats and and people who are unaffiliated, it surpassed the number of registered Republicans. So we're in the millions. So it has to be at least 2 or 3 million, at least maybe two or 1.7, something like that.
And I know there's like about 3.3 or 3.7 million, I think, in Utah. I just saw something on the Wall Street Journal or the thing. So getting these people out to vote, it seems like there's one thing that kind of depressed me was it seemed like everybody was focused on the debate between the Republicans. And one of the reasons I started inviting Democrats from Utah on my show was I looked up, I came here from Vegas, so I looked up, and in Vegas we put in the largest group of women into office in the legislature, and they are doing amazing things for women and children and education and just the state itself. And I was a big proponent 6 months before that, pushing for, I'm just going to vote straight women ticket. I'm tired of guys. I'm tired of the stupid stuff. I'm a guy. I know how dumb we are. I'm just voting straight women because they have empathy. They care about the future children. They care about children. That's what I'm voting for. And I made a big deal of that for several months before the election and voted that way. And we've seen the results in Nevada. And so when I came up here, I looked around. I said, well, who's this? I saw the Republican guys. And I'm like, which is one of those like the Democrat guy? Because there's a lot of them. And then I found Chris. And then I ended up telling my mom, I go, hey, have you looked at this Chris Hansen guy? And she goes, is he one of those 3 guys or 4 guys? And I'm like, no, he's not one of the 4. That's the Republican dudes. And she goes, well, who's this Chris Hansen guy? And I go, well, here's some data on him. And she's like, I don't know what this guy's all about. And then she started talking to her friends, and her friends didn't know about Chris Hansen either. And so it seems like the media, I don't know, this could be me, this is my opinion, but it feels like the media really has a bias here to talking about the Republicans, the Republican candidates, and the Democrats get left out of the discussion.
I agree.
Is there some way to fix that or change that? Or, I've even thought about calling up TV stations going, hey man, when are you going to publicize I want to see Chris Hansen talking to, across the stage. I want to see Karina talking across the stage to somebody. I want to see debate.
The only way we can change that is, well, we have to have more people like you who's giving them a voice. And we have to also write letters to the editors, create, call the radio stations, call the television stations and say, hey, we need to hear the other side of this conversation. We must have the other side of this conversation. And most of the media, at least locally, is probably owned by conservatives and conservative outlets. So they're going to suppress those voices, unfortunately. Although it's supposed to be unbiased,
that's not
necessarily true.
What kills me is most of the people I've interviewed are fairly conservative. A lot of them are Mormon, and they have Mormon values. They're not like crazy liberals like me that are running around there godless and stuff, and I don't know, just horrible people.
You have to understand. Unfortunately, politics has become very tribal.
Yeah. And
people are listening to the national voices more so than the local voices, unfortunately. They have probably the loudest platform. And so they put everybody in the same bucket.
Yeah.
And everyone should not be in the same bucket.
Yeah.
Chris is amazing. He's very sharp. His resume is astounding. And Katrina, who is his running mate, for lieutenant governor, is astounding when it comes to healthcare, as well as Greg Scortis, who's running for our attorney general. And I'm excited to vote for all three of them, because if you hit it perfectly when you talked about healthcare, Sean Reyes has refused to remove Utah from the lawsuit to repeal the ACA, aka Obamacare, in the middle of a pandemic when people are losing their jobs. Now, yes, I agree in universal health care. Universal health care does not have to mean Medicare for all. Universal health care can take the form of many things, so we don't even have to have that conversation right now. But in the middle of a pandemic and people losing their jobs, when you have 2 million plus people, or I don't even remember how many people are filing for unemployment now, that are out of work. If you're out of work, that means you don't have health care. And COBRA insurance, while you may have access to it, you may not be able to afford it.
Yeah, if you're homeless, it's a little hard to make the payments.
It is extremely expensive.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be in a position where you're choosing between whether or not you're going to feed your kids or buy medicine or pay the rent or your mortgage or car insurance or car payment or eat. Those become life choices that people make, unfortunately.
So basically what we need to do is we need to have more Democrats talk, share. This is one of the things I'm imploring everyone to do, because we have the COVID-19 virus. Share the videos online. Chris and Karina are doing a great job of doing these Facebook Live videos, so people can check those out. I've noticed their shares are now jumping. We've done a lot with our shows. We put them on multiple shows, put them on medium.com, and use my Death Star power of all my social media accounts to just pile them into Google. Because what we want people to be, when they go online and they start thinking about who they're going to vote for as a governor, we want them to be like, oh, there's this guy, and what is he doing? But Utah has been, to my understanding, 40 years of the same party owning the governorship. It's time for change.
It's time for change. It really, truly is. And here's the thing, Chris. You do yourself, or people in Utah do themselves, a disservice when they have a one-party rule. Why is that? Look and see what happened around the Prop 2, Prop 3, Prop 4 issue. Utah voted for every single one of them, and then the legislature got up there and overturned the people's vote. That's what happens when you have legislators who are picking their voters, rather the voters picking their legislator, and they have a supermajority and they overturn the voice of the people. If you live in a district and you voted for Prop 2, Prop 3, Prop 4, and your legislator overturns your vote, you need to vote them out. Period. Vote them out. They're not listening to you.
That was astounding to me. I was down in Vegas when they pulled that stunt, and in Vegas we legalized marijuana. It brought a record number of revenue to the state. It hasn't made any sort of problems other than just making everyone a lot of money, and people that really need it for old age pain and medication like myself can get it. To see the Utah legislature go, no, we're not doing that, and they still haven't even done the will of the people. That's just extraordinary to me. That seems so against what the founders of this Constitution want and everything else. So
they do it because they can.
Yeah.
They do it because they can.
There's no checks and balances.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we need to turn the state the very least purple so there can be checks and balances. I believe Karina and Chris Peterson spoke with us about this, and Greg, the Attorney General candidate. And most everyone I talked to, I wanted a state to go blue, but most everyone I talked to said, Chris, we're happy if it just goes purple, if we just get a balance. And that's really what people want, to have representation in their government. And I just wish there was more money we could somehow get into the hands of Democrats. Maybe it's because people perceive them as well, like you said, it's a red state, so why try? I know there used to be, when I left Utah about 20 years ago, there used to be a joke that the Utah County office was always closed. You can just walk into it, and it was like open on by appointment only. And I was hoping stuff had changed since I had left, but I guess it hasn't. So you're helping oversee the campaigns of what's going on and everyone running for office. Hopefully we'll have more of those people on. In fact, I had invited, I've lost the page here. I have invited Sandra Hollins for a second time on the show. She had a great article about herself, the Utah's first female black legislature, and her voice to the fight against systematic racism. It's front page on the Salt Lake Tribune, if you guys get a chance to get it today. But I'd love to see Chris Peterson and them get a saying, get a motto, bring change to Utah, turn Utah blue. I don't know, bring balance. I don't know, healthcare, some sort of saying. They need something like that. They need a vibe. But that's just my opinion. You guys are the pros up there.
That's more than your opinion.
Thank you.
It really truly is. It's a strategy. Yeah. It's a strategy that works. And it started with Richard Nixon and Roger Ailes.
There you go. I mean, I just watch what Brad Pascal does, man. Those guys really are controlling social media and the airwaves. They have less power now than they had in 2016, but they're still able to micro-target and do stuff that's just insane. And the power of social media, I mean, that's my background. So I know how powerful it is. So a lot of support to that. So if you're out there in the marketplace, you want something different, or you just want to educate yourself on what's available, you can Google all the folks that are running for the Democratic Party. You can reach out to them. I'm sure they've been really great at talking to me. If you really feel strongly about it, you should be voting. You should be talking to your neighbors, relatives, letting people know. Because even though I think a lot of my mom's friends were kind of, they're kind of a little red, they were still willing to listen. Okay, so who's this guy? What is he? They were still willing to shop around. So I think it's good, but we need to help raise the level of the voices and get the message out there and get people aware of what's going on. And I think if more businesses will be pressurized to get more balance in the government and everything else. Maybe some. I
agree.
Because they can't get their.
I agree. Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm here to say that Utah voters are allowed to vote for a Democrat. Yeah. And not only that, so the legislature repealed the straight party box. So you can no longer vote just straight Democrat or just straight Republican anymore. And that's good, and it's bad in some cases, because there were quite a few Democrats who took advantage of that.
Yeah.
It's good because you can say, okay, I want this person, I want this person, I want this person. I may not want this person, I want this person. And that's okay, because we need some balance. But right now, we need all Democrats because if you want to keep your health care because you just lost your job because of COVID-19, you need to vote for Greg Scortis. End of discussion. You need to vote for Greg Scortis.
and everybody, to get everybody in so we can have a balance. Because honestly, if Chris and Karina get in and Greg doesn't get in, which I guess is how your guys' state works, then he's going to be fighting with whoever that Republican is that's not going to want to pull out of that lawsuit. And some of the other dirty things. Greg was great at giving us a whole lot of dirty stuff that was going on in Utah. So, and it's interesting because I had a lot of these discussions just talking about what's going on with COVID-19, but now we're starting to enter a different phase of crisis, I guess you would call it. Yes. Where we're seeing systematic racism, where we're dealing with the police and the George Floyd killing and many other recent killings that have really shined a light, thank God, to video phones, but have shined a light. And we've kind of reached this moment. I've been sitting around for a long time going, why is it taking this long? You know, I remember watching the Rodney King, and we thought that was a very seminal moment. But nothing seemed to happen much after that. And then just more and more. Eric Gardner, I think, from 5 years ago, you saw that and went, okay, maybe now things will change. But I think now there's so many people out of work. There's so many people, like COVID-19 has shown all of the cracks in our society, all of the cracks in everything that we're failing at. It's literally revealed a broken nation. I mean, I think we kind of knew we were broken after 2016. When we were like, holy shit, our friends are closet racists. Who knew? You said you liked Obama, but you lied. But I lost so many friends. I was like, what? I didn't know you were hiding this shit.
I know, right?
Yeah, I was like, you were all kumbaya with Obama, and now you're like, you got the Confederate flag flying there, buddy. I had no idea. You just walked right out of the closet on me. You don't even know you're in there. I'm just watching you slam around. But so let's talk about some of your thoughts on what's going on with our current crisis. We're going with racial relations and police brutality, et cetera, et cetera.
You know, you asked me how am I doing, right? we have been asking each other. A lot of us have been asking each other that question a lot, and no one quite knows how to answer it yet because nothing seems sufficient, really, to describe how we really feel in this moment. We feel tired, but it's not a tired from I just ran a 3-minute mile. Although I won't be running a 3-minute mile.
You and me.
But this is an important moment. And, you know, when 2008 happened and then 2012 happened and we meaning the United States, the electorate, elected Barack Obama president, there were people who believed falsely that we had entered this post-racial America. Mm-hmm. Most Black people did not believe that at all. Because what we saw, well, we were very proud, and that was also a time when we saw an increase in African Americans that were being published, and an increase in the number of African American and Black people that were shown on television, and in positive ways, not the stereotypical ways. That increased during that time, and that was good. But what also increased during that time was hate crimes, and the number of hate groups also increased. Barack Obama had more death threats against him, exactly, than any of his predecessors. So we were not in a post-racial America.
Yeah. And
another thing that happened, and I think this was testing the waters to see how far they could go. Well, we saw the likes of the Limbaughs and company that pushed the envelope of what they could get away with saying on the air. I mean, we saw what happened to Don Imus when he said the nappy-headed blah, blah, blah about the women's basketball team, and he was kicked off the air. Well, he landed back in the media, but on a far right wing, I forget, show. Mm-hmm. And then when Barack Obama happened, and you saw, okay, so we're going to push this again, because they felt like they were allowed, or they should be allowed, to say whatever they wanted to say about the man who was president of the United States, regardless if he was black. Mm. And if I want to call him something other than POTUS, I should be able to, and if I'm not, it's because you're being politically correct. And we need to do away with political correctness. Political correctness became the code word for being overtly racist. So let's do away with political correctness, because we should be allowed to be racist if we want to. And that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. So then Donald Trump happened. Yeah. And the birther movement happened. And no one checked him. And no one checked him because of political correctness. And we should be allowed to be racist because we want to. And that's why we're here. And so Donald Trump, let's face it, Donald Trump is a racist, period. End of discussion. He is a racist. If you support Donald Trump, you support racism. If you're not a racist, or you don't call yourself a racist, or you don't consider yourself a racist, you are okay with racism. End of discussion.
and doesn't that make you a racist, though, if you support it?
Yes.
I mean, that's my opinion, but I keep getting told I'm wrong. But
yes. No one likes to be called a racist. Mm-hmm. But you know what? If it walks like a duck.
Well, and I hope you'll excuse the reference, but I believe, I can't remember who said this, but they said during Donald Trump, they said, look, if you're the one giving or selling or supporting the lynch mob with rope, just because you're not at the lynching doesn't mean that you're part of the crime. You're an accessory to the crime. You're part of the crime. And if you're supporting them, you're giving them money, you're giving them votes, they have a racist agenda. I mean, you got to be a real idiot. I mean, I could kind of go with a lot of people were kind of like, maybe they weren't in touch with their closet racism, or maybe they were, they really hated Hillary or whatever. But I still think borderline there was some, because anytime I've seen interviews with the 2016 electorate that voted for Donald Trump, you talk to them and, they have issues at first, and it's their emails, and it's Hillary. But then once you start getting into it, then you start seeing the code words of racism, those people, culture, our culture. You start hearing the words that even Donald Trump uses, they're code words, well, this is our America. And people hear that and they go, oh, he's just talking about us as America. No, he's meaning the white, he's basically running for Confederate president at this point. He's going. Yeah. So that's always been my thing. I mean, but now 4 years later, after Charlottesville, they're very fine people on both sides. I mean, he came out and said he was a nationalist, which was code for white nationalism. He's done everything he can to support them and everything else. At this point, if you're still voting for him, I'm sorry, in my opinion, you're a racist because you're supporting racism.
Yes, you are, and you're supporting, even worse, to be honest about it. And that's what got us to this moment, because Black America knows this. We know this. We know the dog whistles that are being blown, and it's at us, at the expense of. We hear how he speaks to mostly the women of color, the reporters, during the White House press briefings, if they have one. Yeah. And he targets them. You have members of his administration who does the same. And there's no reprimand. In fact, they may get a promotion if they target a person of color. If you look at his cabinet, if you
look at the
at
White House staff picture,
yeah, look at the
God.
staff pictures. If you look at even with the COVID-19 task force, they had a conference room table, and I get really emotional. You know, I'm a Quaker. I embraced Quakerism as my adulthood, and I grew up as Pentecostal. And my husband, when I give a talk, sometimes the Pentecostal comes out.
Preach.
Yeah, he calls me the Pentecostal Quaker.
I'll leave that to you and your marriage psychologist. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what that means.
My father loves it. But I get really passionate about this because it is so serious. And we have to pay attention at what's happening and what's right in front of us and what we are seeing with our own eyes. And it goes back to George Orwell in 1984. What we are seeing with our own eyes, we cannot deny it. And at his table, at the conference table of his COVID-19 task force that is predominantly killing people of color, there was no people of color at that table. None.
Yeah.
None. You're not at that table. That is by design. That is by design.
Yeah.
And if you don't recognize what is happening in the message that is being sent to his supporters and the people who want to vote for him, they want to return to what the Confederacy represented, which was white supremacy in white America. That is what that's all about.
Yeah.
And we have to recognize that. If you do not want to align yourself with that, if you say that is not me, then you have to, and I'm going to say it, you have to vote for Joe Biden. End of discussion.
I see these idiots that are online going, yeah, I've always voted Republican, and I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump this year, but I don't know that I could vote for Joe Biden. I'm like, do you understand that you're basically still voting for Donald Trump if you don't go vote for Biden? I mean, it's just astounding to me. The more I looked into this, I thought I was just the only lazy one who didn't vote every few years. But it was astounding to me that over half this country does not vote, doesn't register to vote, basically there's 25% in this country that vote for either party. And there's like a bunch of idiots in the middle who can't figure out which side they're on because they're those people that you're like, do you want to go to McDonald's? Do you want to go to Wendy's? And like, I don't know. And you're like, when are you going to know? I don't know. I have a hard time. It's like, I
don't understand that. I don't understand how anybody could be undecided right now.
I don't know. There's some people I meet that they have trouble. Like they're the person who they spend an hour making the life choice, whether they're going to have the burger or the quarter pounder at McDonald's. And you're like, it's fucking McDonald's. Like, it's on the fucking menu. Like you should have known like a year before you got here what you were going to order. And they're like, well, what do you have on the menu? And, they're making like a life choice. Like they put more time into choosing between Big Mac and quarter pounder and the extra fries than they do in their marriage. And I don't know, whatever else they got going in their life. I don't know, kid.
Yeah. Joe Biden say we're fighting for the soul of America.
We really are.
And that's true. We really are. Yeah.
I know that Eric Holder in the Obama administration and Obama push for police reforms. They had all sorts of agreements with the states and to try and get police unions to reform. Ferguson was a big proponent for that because it was so awful there. And they started, going after these police departments and precincts that had issues. I've known my share of bad cops. I mean, not all cops are bad, but one of the problems is good cops can't turn in bad cops. And there's that blue line. I've seen Serpico. If you're a cop who calls shit out, you're not gonna. You got to watch your back from there on out. And these are people that are licensed to kill, so they can misfire a gun or whatever. But so do you see George Floyd's killing? And everything that's gone thereafter. In fact, we have the new upswell in Atlanta from that young man who who way too much use of force for DUI. You know, I mean, you watch the videos and you're just like, why does this have to keep happening? And I mean, it's even more amazing because we're in this crisis stage and we're 3 weeks in and we still have cops that just feel like they can pop off their gun anytime they want. Do you really feel like this is a seminal moment that's going to change the world, or is this going to die out in 3 or 4 weeks and people are just going to be like, yeah, whatever the next crisis is?
No, this is a moment that's going to change the world.
Good.
And I really believe that because the world has seen the effect of Donald Trump and what he represents. Mm-hmm. What happens in America does not stay in America. We are leaders around the world, and people do look to us and look up to us. And white supremacy is on the rise around the world. Mm-hmm. And when we elected Donald Trump, it did give voice to white supremacy. It gave voice to white supremacy around the world, not just here in the United States. Mm-hmm. And that fight is happening around the world. And I think that's the reason why you see protests happening around the world. There are people who are fighting back. And I say America, the United States, Utah, voters around this country, we cannot mess this up. We cannot screw this up. We have to look to history when we got it wrong. Mm-hmm. And yes, the 1930s, the 1929 post-Great Depression Germany got it wrong. They did not stop the rise of Hitler. They did not stop the rise of Nazi Germany. And Germany was hurting after the Great Depression. We could think about that, what's happening right now with COVID, right? Mm-hmm. And we're entering Great Depression numbers, and people are losing their jobs. We cannot give into fear. We cannot give into hopelessness to allow someone like Donald Trump and William Barr, who Donald Trump cannot be Donald Trump without William Barr.
Yeah.
That's the truth. And we cannot allow them to take us to a point of no return that can ricochet around the world if we don't get this right.
Yeah. Do you feel one of the biggest problems with the 2000 election was there was a lot of voter suppression in the Black community. In the South, there was the usual games with the polls. But a lot of Black people didn't show up because they were disenfranchised. They felt, they didn't have leadership. A lot of them were just so disgusted by it. I wasn't happy to vote for Mrs. Clinton. I respect her. I'm not a big Hillary Clinton fan because I lived through the 90s with the two of them and wasn't a fan of them then. I think she's a good person, and I voted for her. But I didn't want to vote for her. But I know a lot of people felt suppressed. It's just she had a lot of baggage. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. She had a lot of baggage, and you have to remember this was a 25-year-old.
I was all for women.
Yeah,
I was all for women. I'm fine with that. I lived through the 90s with the Clintons. I actually voted for Ross Perot the first time. I was one of those people. But there you go.
I really did. I was one of those people.
That dude was crazy, man.
I know. When I think about that now, I'm like, what in the world was I thinking? But
he seemed really sane until he quit, and then it started getting weird. And just like, oh shit, we dodged a bullet there.
I know. Yeah, we really did.
We didn't learn.
But you have to remember, the country did great. The country did great under Bill Clinton. The country did great under Bill Clinton.
Balanced the budget.
The country does great under Democratic president. It does. I mean, the problem with Democrats, and I'm going to criticize us a little bit, and I'm a Democrat at heart, is we allow the Republican Party to shape our messaging. And we allow them to portray us in the way that we are not, that we're constantly playing defense rather than offense, always, constantly. we can run on a Democratic platform, a Democratic message, and a Democratic record. It's a good record.
Yeah.
We have, under Democratic presidents, the deficit have gone down. And most people didn't even know what deficit was until Barack Obama was president. Then all of a sudden, deficit.
Yeah. And you can think a lot of what George Bush did, what do they call it? They deregulated the banks and the
yes.
Barney Dodd-Frank thing. They let just these guys go crazy with mortgages. I owned a mortgage business back then, so I saw all the stupid idiot stuff that went on.
Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah. And we have to be the leaders of our message. We have to have a message. But along with Hillary Clinton, but I voted for Hillary Clinton. I had no problems voting for Hillary Clinton. If you understand, most of the baggage that she brought with her had been dumped on her for over 25, 30 years, starting as First Lady of Arkansas when she made the mistake of really pissing off a lot of conservative women, especially and Southern women being from Arkansas, that she was not going to stay home and bake cookies. Remember that? And they have been at her ever since. She said that ever since.
Yeah.
Yes, ever since. And
she had a good heart. She wanted to do healthcare. They tried to get healthcare. Yeah.
She was a smart woman with a voice, and that pisses a lot of people off.
Pisses a lot of Republicans off. I know.
Yes.
Male chauvinism. I mean, we have so many problems in this fucking country. It's not even funny. So, do you feel that? So I hit on that a lot of African American people didn't show up for the vote in 2016 because they were just, they just hated the whole thing of it. Do you feel that, especially with Eric Garner's the protests that are going on, that those folks are going to show up and vote for Biden this time?
Oh yeah,
and we're going to
just. They already have.
I mean, the most beautiful thing we can do is we can bury the needle on Donald Trump so hard at so many people that come out to vote. And so many people to vote against him. Like, there's no way he's going to be able to pull one of those Bush Gore things on us where, like, well, there's kind of there's a little margin. Like, we need to, like, send him and his racism and his Confederacy shit packing full bore to where all of his followers, all those people, and I'm not talking just Trump followers, because there's some people out there at GOP and maybe they're not just in touch with their closet racism. But all of his white nationalist people, like I recently posted about how somebody was saying they're trying. I think one of the senators is trying to get. Well, it was the recent thing with lynching where we couldn't get lynching like fully outlawed in the nation. You're like, why is that not a fucking thing?
I know. Why did it take 2002? Yeah. I mean, 2020. I mean, I'm like 2002, 2020. This is 2020.
Everyone should be forced to go down to, I think it's in Georgia, but that new
it's in Alabama.
Is in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
That new lynching museum that's down there, that will break your heart, wreck your soul. And if you can walk through there without not breaking a tear, I've watched the videos on it, and realize the horrificness. I think they did a beautiful job of it. It's sad that they had to build it, but I think it really brings home the thing. But and then recently, we want KKK to be on the terrorist list. And you're just like, why is that still a thing? Like, why is it not? Like,
so they want to designate Antifa as a terrorist organization.
Look, trying to find the newsletter for Antifa.
I mean, when you think about it, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to punch a Nazi?
With bad people, But so you think they're going to come out for the vote?
It's not that what I think; it's what I know. They already have.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that makes me sleep
numbers.
Better, right?
Yeah, look at the numbers that Joe Biden, and I like Joe. I like Joe.
That's great.
Joe Biden has been in the community for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
People know Joe Biden.
People know Joe.
And they know him. They know his heart. They know his history.
Yeah.
He has shown up even when the cameras were not rolling. That is the reason why South Carolina showed up in force to vote for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
That's the reason. Now, we have voter suppression is real. That's real. And right now with COVID-19 and the push to not have mail-in ballots, that's voter suppression. Because they know, especially in the Black and brown folks who overwhelmingly vote Democratic, older Black Americans overwhelmingly vote Democratic. Well, Black Americans overwhelmingly vote Democratic anyway, but so does older people overwhelmingly vote Democratic. It's voter suppression, and they're trying to get people, especially in the middle of a pandemic, too afraid to show up and vote because they don't want to get COVID, obviously. But also, look what happened in Georgia 2 weeks ago. Standing in line for 5 hours to vote.
Yeah.
That's voter suppression.
That's by design,
voter
too.
Suppression.
We saw it in Minnesota, I believe.
Yes.
Michigan.
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, that's it. Yeah.
Yes.
And so I'm hoping that this is going to happen. I like how things are going. Unfortunately, and we talked about this in the Chris Voss Show, what defund the police means. Unfortunately, that's a horrible model logo that, that should have been, I don't know who came. I mean, you don't really have a choice. It's like the mob that comes up with this. But I love what we're talking about now, because we need to put more money that's going to these police unions. That there needs to be a way to get bad cops out of the system. And if good cops can't turn in bad cops, I was watching some of the articles and conversation with Camden, New Jersey, who threw out their police union, threw out their police department, fired everybody, restarted. There's lots of companies that have done this. Like I've worked for companies. I haven't worked for companies, but I've known of companies that they start over. They fire everybody and they go, you got to rehire for your job back. Tell us why you want it. You got to restart over. And I think we're here now. Here now. I'm tired of seeing the videos of abuse, of police brutality. In fact, it became even more ironic when the protests and the riots were about police brutality and how horrific they'd been with George Floyd, and then you just see more of it, and you're just like, holy shit, you guys still aren't getting the message. Like the world's burning, and you guys still aren't fucking getting it, cops. Yeah. Like not all cops, but you see these heinous things. And you start to realize that there needs to be more power over these folks. I think Ilhan Omar, the representative, said it today.
Ilhan Omar.
She said on one of their shows.
She was Minnesota.
Yeah, and she said, a lot of cops are judge, jury, and executioner, and this is going to stop. I mean, there's the guy was drunk in his car from 2 nights ago in Atlanta, and he maybe he was over the limit or something, and he resisted arrest. But is that a murder offense? If he would have gotten away, they would have gotten him tomorrow. They got his car, they got his address, they know where he lives. He wasn't gonna he's not a serial killer. He's not gonna go kill other people. And to have that now, but I'm glad. I think it's something that needs to happen. I think people are sick of everything with these protests, and they're seeing the failures of the government. They're seeing the failures of the financiers. And I love seeing these Confederate statues go down. I love it. I love it. Me too. Even worldwide, they've got slave trader things that were, I think, in London or the UK that they pushed into the thing. And we had this argument a few years back with the rebel flag. I grew up having the rebel flag as a teenager because I was a rebel teenager, and I didn't understand the context of it. To me, it was just the rebel flag. You're like, what is it? This is the rebel flag. This is what you have for rebels. And I was a rebelling teenager. I had no idea the context. I knew that it did some stuff in the Confederacy, but I think we've really reached a great moment now where we've all kind of woken up to like, hey, the Confederacy was a bunch of losers. They were traitors to America. They fought the U.S. Army. So, if you're a Republican, you're like, I support the U.S. Army and the military, but I'm also a Confederate flag flyer and I support a white nationalist president. You're like, wait, No, they killed U.S. soldiers when you really fucking think about it. And then, fortunately, when I think it came up after Charlottesville, where there started to be discussions about how many of these Confederate statues, and they were put up by I believe the Daughters of the Confederacy.
The Daughters of the Confederacy.
And it was put up during Jim Crow eras. These weren't put up like after the Civil War. We're like, we should put these up because we really like Robert E. Lee. They were put up as these symbols of domination to go, you may have more rights, with voting rights and everything else that have been given to you, but we're still in control. We still run the city. And for a lot of people, and listening to a lot of African-American friends of mine, they have always hold disdain. I think one of them said to me the other day, or I watched an interview the other day, and he said, my father would never drive down those roads that were named after Confederates in the city. And predominantly they did that too, to keep those areas white. You look at the redlining of what that is. And so I'm glad we're finally taking these things down. I would love to see all the military bases change. I had no idea that Fort Bragg and these other, I didn't know what they were named after, but I came to a lot of awareness of it after Charlottesville. And one of the papers, or one of the online papers, posted all of the named elementary schools and buildings that were named after Confederate generals. And you just looked at it through the South, and it was like, holy shit.
I know. That's true.
They're really proud of that, losing and surrendering in the South, being traitors. And so it really gave awakening. So I'm glad we're tearing these monuments down. I'm glad we're renaming stuff. I think, you could read it. I learned about history in the history books. I didn't need to see a statue of George Washington. I read about him in a book. It was fine. If you want to put all those things in a little racist warehouse and whatever, and I don't know what they do with that, but just put them in there, and I don't know. I guess if anyone wants pictures or something, they can go in there, and then we can all write their name down and keep track of who they are. But I'm glad it's happening. I think I'm hoping that this is a seminal moment in history. I hope this is maybe it's Biden said it's bigger than MLK. I think from a numbers game it is, because the population of the world is much larger. MLK had a huge impact. His death had a huge impact. His martyrdom for America. One of my favorite speeches to watch sometimes when I get really dark and depressed is Bobby Kennedy. In his speech, I believe that was on Philadelphia the night that MLK was murdered, and that he gives this beautiful speech, and they didn't want him to, because they were worried that he would get attacked or assassinated, but he gives this beautiful speech, and he of course had lost his brother to being assassinated as well, so it was even more powerful. But he gives this beautiful speech, and that was the one city in America where he gave that speech that did not riot that night. And it's too bad that today we'd have that broadcast over thing. But I'm hoping that this is a seminal moment that's just like MLK, that brings us to a new realization. I remember an African American, I think it was Van Jones, if you're familiar with him, from CNN. I think it was him or one of his friends that wrote back when we started to see the first emergence of Stephen Miller's racist agenda, that we started seeing the hints that Donald Trump was really a racist. And he said, what's great about this moment is we're peeling back the curtain. Now we know who the racists are. We have to see it. It's in our face. No, we're not hiding it anymore. Like one of the things I started noticing, I never believed Fox News. I've always thought Fox News was bullshit, clean back to when Geraldo pulled that stunt in Desert Storm, and he gave away the position. And Geraldo has always been an idiot in my mind, so there's that. But I started having these friends that once Donald Trump started giving rise in 2015, and I started having these friends start bashing Obama, and you'd be like, "You're what? I know which channel you're watching." And it started coming out, and it started to become apparent to me. I'm like, you guys are fucking closet racists. And I started learning the code words and the stuff, and I'm like, even I had to kind of look at, okay, so do I have some closet racism going on? Do I have some issues? Or, I started learning about words that you can use that if you're not really tuned in or aware of what's going on, they show a bias and they show discrimination. Culture is one, and like I didn't realize until Donald Trump really started using the word culture, and I'm like, okay, what the fuck does he mean by culture? And then you're like, oh, it means white nationalists. Oh, okay, our white culture, And I started seeing the signs in Alabama about white genocide. And I was like, my friends who lived in Alabama, they would see these billboards of white genocide. And I'm like, what the fuck is white genocide? Like, what is there something going on I don't know about? I know about Jewish genocide and, different things that have gone on around the world with genocide. But what's this white genocide? What's going on? And they start reading about it. And you're like, holy fucking shit. Like, I don't know. You kind of always know that you have a white privilege, but when you really start sitting down and thinking about it, and measuring it, and then measuring what other people don't have and what they're living with, and discussions they have to have with their children, and the moment that they have to wake up one day when I read a lot of different articles of when I can't remember who published it, but they published it in about 2016. They talked about the first moment they got called the N-word. And when as a child, they lived in this wonderful bliss of innocence that we all do as children. And then all of a sudden they had to realize that there were people who were prejudiced against them because of their skin color. And then that's when it like hit in, and their parents had to sit down with them. One of the pictures that always touches me the most is Martin Luther King standing on his front lawn with his young son. And there's a burnt cross that was in his front lawn. And he's standing there with his son. And I look at his son just from a human aspect. And I go, my God, what did that have to be like as a father to have to either explain that to his son, or just for a son to see that? Like, I have no idea what I would have done if people were burning crosses in the front yard as a child.
Yeah. I mean, Medgar Evers was shot and killed in his front yard.
Yeah. And it's just a tragedy at every level. And we used to be this America that we were like, hey, do you have a problem? Okay, well, let's lift you up. And we do have the darkness of racism, but I'd hope we become America where we've risen up. But now we become America that's so fractured and so financially desperate and broke. The elimination of the middle class with trickle down economics and everything else. What Republicans have done, and so now we're turning on each other, going, "Fuck you, I need mine, and I don't care about yours." But we forget that the rising tide lifts all boats. If I help you up, then you help someone else up, or I'm going to fall down and you're going to help me back up because I helped you. I mean, this is what America used to be about. And so I'm really, it's sad that we have to lose so many people and the tragedy has to happen, but I'm really, I'm hopeful in what's going on with these riots and what's really nice is there was kind of the riot period, and now they've just really turned into these really peaceful protests, which make it even harder for Fox News and Donald Trump to be like, oh, look at those rioters, they're bad,
Well, as long as they're allowed to call them rioters and looters, the conversation shifts. And because those are criminals. Protesters are protected by the First Amendment. Rioters and looters are not. So that's the difference.
So I'm hoping it's going to be a major change, and I hope the message we send to Donald Trump is so powerful that like there's no, I mean, because if it's close, he's going to be like having lawyers going, we need to recount that vote and all that BS. But I hope it's so overwhelming, and I hope he's still not in deep stages of dementia, because he's showing that now in mini strokes. I hope I just want him to be conscious of when America rejected him and rejected his Confederacy, his white nationalism, his racism. And, we need
Utah. We need Utah to reject it. We need Utah to vote against Donald Trump and to vote for Joe Biden. That would be astounding and wonderful, and totally send the message when Utah voters say, this is not who we are. This is not who we are.
Yeah. It's not who we are and who we want better. We need to love everybody. We need to love Americans. And I've said this before, hopefully COVID-19 brings us close together, because we realize that if my neighbor isn't healthy, I'm not healthy, we could all die. There might be another pandemic coming. So I appreciate you coming on the show, Darlene. I know I've taken a lot of your time, and you're welcome to come on anytime you want. I'd love to have you back again. We could probably talk forever about politics.
I know.
Races,
we could.
You know, if someone the final thing I want to bring up, what's the best thing someone can do if they're concerned, if they have racist tendencies? Maybe they feel they're a closet racist, or the things that I do as a white person that are racist. How can someone like that get educated on how maybe to clear out some of their issues?
That's a good question, and it's a question that's being asked to Black people a lot. And I see this on social media, posted by Black people. It's like, how are we supposed to answer this question?
Maybe Google closet racism and figure it out.
But here's what you can do. Look in your immediate circle and see how much diversity you have in your immediate circle. Look at your church. Look at your grocery store. Look in your family. Does everyone look alike? Look at the things that you read. Look at the television shows that you watch. Look at the news that you listen to. Look at all of that, because you can answer that question quite easily.
Yeah. And one of the challenges with Utah is it has a predominantly high white state. I mean, it's a 90 or 93%. I just looked it up.
No, it's less than that. It's gosh, why do you know what? I'm thinking about something else. It could be between in the 80s, I think.
It might be 87.
Yeah.
Might be. I had looked it up and had it in the Chris Peterson. I came from California, so I grew up in the melting pot. So I came from California, and then my parents moved us here in the teens, and I was shocked. I was like, "Where's everybody else? Like, there's a lot of white people." And like one of my favorite stories is we went to the Mexican restaurant that was here in Utah. This is like 40 years ago, and I go, can I get some hot sauce? And they brought us ketchup, and I'm like, this isn't hot sauce. And they're like, and it took me 6 months to see a Hispanic man here. And when I went up to him, I shook his hand. I'm like, oh, cool. Everyone else is here. There are other people here. Fucking white people. Don't even get me started on white people cooking in Utah. Oh my God. I grew up in California. You have these boroughs where you can go to. You can go to Little Vietnam, Chinatown. You can go all these little boroughs and all these little delis back then. You had all the small Italian delis and stuff. And so you can go to these places and get authentic food, meet authentic stuff. There's still places in California you can go down there and just, you can meet these people from another country that still don't speak a lick of English, but they'll make you the best damn whatever nationality of food there is. It will be the best thing you ever had. They'll come out. They'll be the nicest folks to you. They can't understand you. And you're like, I don't care what language you speak, man. You serve this kind of food, baby. I love you.
We all connect over food.
That's all connect over Anthony Bourdain. But maybe I could be the fat Anthony Bourdain someday. But no, I would implore everyone, and I think I'd add to the great advice that you had. If you want to understand what's going on, listen to what Black people are saying, listen to what people of color are saying, listen to what people that are suffering from job loss, suffering from COVID-19 more, realize that we're I got thinking about it. We're really not that far from equal rights. The 1960s, we're not that far. We had 400 years going before that of slavery and repression and the ugly stuff we did. I mean, we're just finally getting around to tearing down the Confederacy. I mean, we're still in a place of rebuilding and regrouping and realignment. And one of the things that gave me hope was that I've been holding on to for dear life was when Obama said, sometimes America zigs and it zags, and where it zags back to is the most important. And I forget who wrote the book, Our Better Angels. He's a famous historian, but hopefully
John Meacham.
Yeah, John Meacham. Yeah. Hopefully that's what we get back to is our better angels. So I think the important thing is to listen and wonder, okay, And if people are hurting, we shouldn't kick them. We should lift them up and go, how can I help you? How can we do better? And I think if you're a white person there, Google closeted racism and see if you have any of they're like little words that people use and they don't realize that imply a sense of bias. And fortunately, I grew up in a very diverse thing, but I think it's harder in Utah because, I mean, try and find, other than the metro area of any city, it's hard to find people.
We are here. Believe it or not, we are here. And we are even in Utah County.
Yeah.
We are up north. We are here. And you can diversify your circle.
Mm-hmm.
You can become involved in organizations that seek diversity and inclusion. You can seek it out. You don't have to believe everything that you thought, every stereotype that you hear on Fox News about Black people, mostly about Black liberals. Get to know who we are. Listen to what we are saying. Trust us. You don't have to speak for us. Trust us. We can speak for ourselves.
Yeah. And we're all human beings. We all have kids. Yes. We all want the best for our families. We all want the best for America. We want, everybody to have a fair shake. We want people to, be hired and be judged on their merits of just being good human beings. I mean, I live with the song Imagine. Anytime I lose my way, I go back to Imagine by John Lennon. And where everyone's, we're all human beings. That should be the flag we're under, technically. I mean, I'm American, but I believe in being a citizen of the world. But anyway, it's been wonderful to have you on, Darlene. Give us your website so people can look you up, follow you, get to know you better.
It is DarleneMcDonald.com.
There you go. And I implore all my audience to get registered to vote. I mean, I don't care if you're going to vote for Trump. Just register to vote, man. Get involved with politics. Get involved. Do the thing. Just remember, he's against absentee ballots, and you can get COVID-19 if you come vote. I just saw the Republicans are burning the absentee ballots. It turns out a lot of their stuff comes from the absentee ballots. This is hilarious, but it's Darwinism.
That's right. I saw that. We're okay with that. They can burn their ballots if they want to.
Burn your ballots. Go ahead. Sure. Don't show up. It's COVID-19. It's on the handle of the door. I'll be there coughing. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that. But it's vote. This is what my big vote for was in 2018. Vote for empathy. Vote for people who care about everybody, because if they care about you, they care about me, they care about your kids, they care about your future. Vote for people who care. Vote for people that have empathy. So thanks to my audience for tuning in. We have this show on both the resistanceradio.com and the chrisvossshow.com, probably chrisvosspodcast.com. So go to those websites, check them out, subscribe to the show, go to thecvpn.com or chrisvosspodcastnetwork.com. 9 podcasts there. You know the drill. youtube.com/Chris Voss. You can see the video of my discussion here with Darlene McDonald, and support the Democratic Party. Help Utah go blue, or whatever state you're in for that matter this year. Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.